Hi, and welcome to English 100 Week 4. We are going to talk a little bit this time about between the world and me and noun phrase appositives. And so a couple things about Coates' book. I hope you guys are really enjoying it. I know it's a little rough. He doesn't offer a lot of solutions, and he brings up maybe some of the uncomfortable aspects of American history and kind of issues of race moving forward. But I think it's a well-written and an interesting book, and I think it's provocative in ways that I hope that you, even if you don't agree with what he says, I hope you at least find the way he writes about it maybe fresh or in an interesting way. It did win the National Book Award recently, and he's just won a Guggenheim as well. So anyway, he one of the topics he brings up that I want to kind of go into a little bit is his discussion of fear. He, in the early pages of this book, you'll notice that he talks a lot about how all black people he knew were afraid, and he could tell that by the way, like the kids on the street corners, like the way they dressed, the music they listened to, the way their body language, the way they talked, even how they fought. And when he has this really distinct situation where this guy pulls out a gun, and when he's a young kid, pulls out a gun in a parking lot and points it at him, he realized exactly how vulnerable he is. And he had family members who had been killed, and he noticed when someone in his family allowed made a mistake and allowed something potentially dangerous to happen, or if he got in trouble, there was a lot of physical punishment. There were beatings, and he saw those as a way of communicating to the black children that he was one of, that you have to be careful of this black body, otherwise you will be killed, and you could be killed just as easily by police as you could be by a kid in a parking lot. When he talks about the black body, he makes these points that racism is it's a physical experience for black people. Um, it's not theoretical. It's not just an idea. It's not just like, oh, you hurt my feelings. It's a physical feeling of fear and safety. And it might be subtle, but sometimes, but it is a physical experience. The picture you see here is of a recent case, and we're going to talk about many cases, but this one was not one that ended horribly in the sense of a murder or of a killing, but it speaks to a lot. In June of last year, there was a pool party. Some African American kids were hanging out afterwards at the pool. It was a public pool, and a white woman didn't really like their presence there and started yelling at them and telling them to go back to the plantation or their Section 8 housing, yelling these stereotypes, and then proceeded to physically slap one of the girls. And then that girl, responded physically, and there was an altercation. Police were called. And when this police officer arrives, who you see in the picture on duty, when he arrives to the scene, he starts physically tackling the black teens who were there, one woman in particular who's behind him on the ground. And then he gets up and he pushes down another boy who's 16. And then right here in this part, he is pulling out his gun. He starts pointing it randomly at all these teens who are completely unarmed and just at a pool party. Because they were complaining about what was happening. And he was, because of the video, he was unilaterally let go of his duties. He resigned from pressure from his department. His chief said it was unprecedented and a horrible situation. And it was interesting, they went back and looked at his history, and they found out that he had been recently promoted, but they looked a little further and found out that he also had a civil case against him for illegal search, a body cavity search, where he also used racial slurs against someone, and that was settled civilly in a lawsuit. So it just speaks to, and that's one specific case, but it speaks to even now, and Coates' book was written just last year, but even now it continues to happen, these incidences where African Americans' bodies are valued less and are more often destroyed, more so than others, especially by those in authority. And so one of the things he talks about is with his son about safeguarding his body. Coates also does not believe in religion or an afterlife, so this idea of, there's heaven or there's this thing afterwards. He believes actually that the body is what's sacred, and so preserving your body is the most holy and important thing you can do. He also makes this point that slavery is specific. It's specific, real men and women and children, specific people who were physically tortured, were raped, were taken from their homes. I mean, I don't know if you really thought about it. If tonight someone came in your home and took you and, took you to another country, and there was no legal, protection for you. You didn't speak the language of the people who took you. They forced you to work your whole life, and that was your life. That was it. And your children, maybe via rape or via you had them before, had the same fate. And this went on for 250 years. And so if you can imagine, we can't really wrap our brains around it, but if you can try to imagine it, the scars from things like this do not go away easily. It's not just like everything's fine. And so I think he wants us to think about that these are real people who had real lives, and that the U.S. Built itself basically on the backs of these people. This is a really harsh shift after talking about that, which is so heavy, but I wanted to just bring up those few points before we moved on. And on a technical note, although I'm going to use Coates's book for the examples with this, one technique when you're writing to try to help with sentence combining, which many of you need some work on, is to use noun phrase appositive. So what is it? It's a group of words that follow a group of words that follows any noun and that says more about that noun, describes it. And it's nice to use because it allows you to give some description without writing an extra sentence. It's set off by commas, and it kind of creates some coherence and some focus. So you don't have to have extra sentences that are just description. You can get those out of the way and focus on more important things. So the pattern here is you have a noun, you have a comma, you have the noun phrase appositive, another comma, and the rest of the sentence. And that the noun phrase appositive can come anywhere in the sentence, and it anywhere after a noun in the sentence, and it can does not have to be the subject of the sentence. It just has to be a noun. So here's some examples. The first one, and I've bolded the noun phrase appositive portion. Ta-Nehisi Coates, and then the bolded part, author of Between the World and Me and winner of the National Book Award, and that's the noun phrase appositive, argues that the American dream is a myth. So all of that part that's in bolded and quote and in commas is saying more about the noun Coates. Okay. And the second one, Coates argues that the destruction of the black body is part of American history. So the word we're looking to build a noun phrase appositive off of is history. And here we just have one comma because it's the end of the sentence, and we say a dark past that is often whitewashed. And lastly, in his book Between the World and Me, Coates describes how, though he dropped out of Howard University, and then in commas, a place he calls his Mecca, comma, he acquired a solid education there in its library. So that's a good one because you were able to get a little bit more detailed about Howard University without writing a whole new sentence. Okay, so those are some examples. I hope that you can try to use My goal is for you in your essay to use 2 noun phrasal positives, underline them or identify them in some way so I can note that you understand them. And then also remember that if you use 5 vocabulary words correctly in your essay and you bold them, you can have an extra 2 percentage points. All right. Let me know if you have any questions. Thanks.